I'm really writing this out as a way to vent because I'm in a situation where I feel really stuck. Any advice is appreciated, but I'm not sure there's anything that can be said or done to actually help. I've tried just about everything. I'm going to start from the beginning. This is a story 2 years in the making, so I'll try to be as thorough as possible. In 2019, I graduated with my master's degree and moved to a relatively rural area for my PhD. Thinking we'd make an investment, my dad and I purchased a house. The intent was to rent it out once I completed my PhD. This house was only a block away from a dive bar where my dad was able to make some pretty good friends. He introduced me to everyone, and everyone let me know that I would be so happy to move into my new house because my next door neighbor was an absolute nicest guy you could ever meet. So, we met the next door neighbor, and he did seem nice enough. He suggested we exchange numbers just in case I needed anything, and I thought that was a good idea. Worst idea I could have made. A few days later, my dad left to go back to his house, and I was left alone with a bunch of my own devices. Literally the day he left, it started. My neighbor texted me while I was away and let me know if he had a gift for me on my front porch. In this text exchange, he started using pet names like Sweetie and Cutie. I went home and he had left a hand-painted feeding dish for my cats in the mailbox. At this point, I wasn't that alarmed. He was just being nice, I thought. The next day, he sent me more texts with pet names, and I took the opportunity to make sure he knew I wasn't interested in anything romantic. He replied back with a rambling text about how all a person ever needs is a friend and he would just like to be that with me. After that, he would send me texts frequently. Everything from inviting me fishing to telling me he left more gifts on my porch. I would often not reply or tell him I'm busy. I didn't want to be rude, but I also had no intentions in any sort of relationship with him other than my neighbor. One night, I got a text from the manager of the bar down the street, letting me know that if my neighbor knocked on my door, I shouldn't answer. She then told me that my neighbor had walked down to the bar with a hatchet and told the bartender he was hearing voices that got louder as he got closer to the bar. He threatened to kill someone with the hatchet if the voices didn't stop. They called the police, and the police took the hatchet from him, but made no arrest. The manager of the bar picked me up, and I spent the night at her house. She told me that the police said my neighbor was on meth. After that, I tried to keep my distance even more, but things got even weirder. One day, I went out to my car to find a dead squirrel in the driveway. The squirrel had been clearly run over and moved to the right in front of my driver's side door. I just stepped over it, got in my car, and left. When I returned home, the squirrel was gone. Shortly after, I received a text from my neighbor that said someone or something put a dead squirrel in your driveway. Don't worry, I moved it for you. I felt like this was a weird way to word this, and I suspect he's the one who put the squirrel in my driveway. Another time, I walked out of my house to see he had placed an unspent shotgun shell on the bricks in front of his house. He came out and told me that it was to serve as a warning for anyone walking between our houses. For the next couple of months, I did my best to avoid him. He would text me inviting me over, and I would come up with an excuse or just ignore him completely. I wanted to remain cordial since he was my neighbor, but it was getting very annoying, and I was uncomfortable. He would text me as soon as I got home, telling me that he was watching me come home and go from my house. Around Halloween, he handcrafted a large casket and wrote, "Here lies the last son of a bitch who played mind games, November 2012. What the fuck? All this time, still sending me text. Eventually I got fed up, and I stopped responding completely. Less than 2 weeks after I stopped responding completely, he threw a 50-pound flower pot at my front door. You know those big concrete planters? Yeah, one of those. I called the police, who advised me to get a stalking no-contact order. A few days later, I was watching TV when a notification popped up and my neighbor was trying to cast a video to my screen. I declined it, twice. I filed another report with police. During this time, I started the process of getting a stalking no-contact order. I saw 3 different victim advocates who all told me different things. I went out of town for a conference, and during that time, someone had attempted to break into my house. I had an ADT security system, so while they didn't succeed, I was aware of the attempt. After the conference, I came home to the entire world shutting down because of COVID. I was trapped in my home 24/7, with my stalker neighbor next door. Luckily, court proceedings for protection orders didn't stop. Right before court, he sent me a text telling me he was sorry for what he'd done, that he could tell when he saw me outside that he made me uncomfortable. Then he went on to tell me he can tell my hair has gotten longer and I look beautiful. I went to court and provided all of the evidence I had, the timeline of everything that had ever happened, the text he'd sent me asking if I wanted a massage, the text I sent him telling him the way he was speaking to me was inappropriate, the text saying that he knew he made me uncomfortable. I told the judge that I suspected he had attempted to break into my house while I was out of town. The kicker is, he didn't deny any of it. Actually, he told the judge that he took full accountability for everything. He said he was in recovery and was trying to turn over a new leaf. He didn't oppose the protection order at all. So, in March 2020, I actually received the stalking no contact order. Everything was pretty quiet for a while. I mean, he did some weird shit, but that's because he's a weird guy. It wasn't anything that made me fear for my safety. That is, until he got on drugs again. At this time, we found an unspent shotgun casing in my flower bed. It was consistent with the one he had previously used to send a warning. This occurred a couple of months after I started dating my boyfriend, and I suspect it was a warning to him. After this, and for a variety of reasons, my boyfriend moved in with me. He moved in pretty quickly, but everything turned out fine. We're still together and are as happy in our relationship as we can be. New Year's Day of 2021, I was woken to yelling. I turned on my security cameras and got footage of him sticking his head out of his window and screaming obscenities at my bedroom window for about 7 minutes. It doesn't sound like a long time, but when your stalker is screaming threats and obscenities, 7 minutes is a long time. He called me a harlot. He said, "Happy fucking New Year." He said he was going to blow up his house with a gas line. I called the police, who responded. They told me that he had never said my name, so they can't prove it was a violation of the protection order. The officer said, and I quote, "There's nothing illegal about yelling in your own home." They left without even speaking to him. All I could do at this point was my best to avoid him. I parked on the street because my driveway is pretty close to his front porch. I got used to living with my curtains drawn. I always made sure my cameras were charged, all 5 of them. Yes, because of him, I spent over $1,000 on cameras. Every inch of my yard is covered. Since then, he's been seen by me and by other neighbors talking to people who aren't there. Going outside and screaming nonsense. Things like, "I have churros on my necklace," or "I'll put my dick in your ass." I'm not even kidding. Last night, I was awoken to hammering outside my window at 1 a.m. He was cutting down his privacy fence, horizontally. I called the police for a noise complaint, and they just told him to stop, and that was that. As I write this, he's outside continuing to cut horizontally down his privacy fence. That means the privacy fence only stands about 3 feet tall now. This was the one thing that made me feel relatively safe about hanging out in my backyard, and now it's gone. All of this is to say, I'm fucking tired. I just want to live in a house where I can be sure that my neighbor won't try to kill me, where I can feel confident that he's not going to break in. My boyfriend and I are trying to buy a house to move, but it's difficult. I'm a PhD student, so I don't make very much money. Renting won't work because I have 4 cats, and finding a place to rent with so many animals is difficult, if not impossible. I refuse to rehome then, so maybe it's partially my fault I'm stuck in this situation. My dad has agreed to co-sign on another mortgage, and I've gotten a second job. We should be able to save up enough money within a few months, but until then, I'm stuck. I just don't know what else to do. I'm tired. I'm angry. So I figured I'd write this to vent. If you made it this far, thanks for reading it all. There's still so many different instances that I've left out. I'm just so exhausted. To start off, I live in a small village in the northeast of the UK. There are only 100 or so people living here, and hardly anyone knows its location. Me and my mom have lived here for over 5 or 6 years, and we do love it. There's woods behind our house, and out front there is a pen with 2 lovely horses that I go feed apples and carrots to. However, we have the family from hell next door. The problems with our neighbor started around a year ago, on the 2nd of January. I was downstairs just watching TV while my mom was cleaning out the fire. She went outside to empty out the ashtray, and I could hear her mumbling from outside. The next thing I knew, my mom came inside with the most confused expression ever. I asked her what was up, and she told me after she emptied the ashtray, our neighbor burst outside into her yard and screamed at my mom over the fence. She was screaming nonsense, saying basically that one of her friends couldn't park here anymore, and that was disgusting. I was confused, so I asked her what she meant. Basically, my mom had messaged our other neighbors wishing them a happy new year and all that stuff, as they were at their other house and couldn't tell them in person. But while she was texting them, she saw a car parked around the back of their home, so she asked them if that was anyone to do with them. Now, she didn't really care about the car. She was just curious because the car didn't usually park there. It turns out it was my evil neighbor's son's girlfriend car. Now, this is where things get out of control. My two neighbors text each other about my mom's question, and for some odd fucking reason, they see it as a threat. Yeah, ridiculous, isn't it? Me and my mom just shrugged it off because, to be perfectly honest, we couldn't care less about it. A few hours go by, and my mom went back out again so she could empty our bin. When once again, my neighbor comes storming out, but this time she starts threatening my mom, saying things like, "I'll fucking kill you and run over your dogs, you fat bitch." I was in the kitchen, so I heard everything, and I was shocked. What was wrong with her? My mom had enough and came back inside and called her boyfriend and the police. The police came, and my crazy bitch of a neighbor admitted everything we told him was true, and that she was threatening to hurt us. But like typical British police, they said there was nothing they could do, and told my mom to keep a journal and write down anything she does before he left. There were a couple of incidents where she would record my mom and her boyfriend in the garden and complain about our fire pit. But the next big incident was soon to come. My mom dropped me off into town that was around an hour and a half drive away, so I could go shopping with my mates and drove back home. She decided to park around the back of our house because she needed to empty out the boot and put things into the garage, and decided to leave it there because it was our parking space. A couple hours go by, and I asked my mom to come pick me up because I had finished shopping and most of my friends had gone home except for one friend whose train was going to arrive in half an hour. My mom goes out up to the back and sees that our neighbor has blocked her in, so she goes up to their door to ask if they could quickly move their car. No answer. So she knocks again. No answer. She was clearly in there because she didn't go anywhere without her car. So after 5 minutes, my mom got fed up and called the police to come ask her to move her car. When the police arrived, she came outside, and when they asked her to move her car, she yelled at them no. I could write 1,000 things these people have done, like how they filmed me, a 14-year-old trans guy, sunbathing in my garden because they thought my Switch I was watching videos on was an iPad, or when one morning they opened our back gate so that when we let our dogs out to do their morning business, they nearly ran into the busy road, or even when she came into our yard and nearly knocked out door because our dogs were barking back at her. But this post is already long enough, and I haven't even gotten to the recent story. The most recent incident happened the start of this year. For starters, in December of 2019, my dog Pippin died. It was her time to go, sadly, so we decided to stop her suffering and put her to sleep. So this was already a hard time for me and my mom, because I was giving her at the age of 2, and now I'm 15. But one day, while I was in my bed, my mom was downstairs cuddling my 1-year-old puppy when she noticed something was wrong. He just couldn't lie down. He had a bit of a foam coming from his mouth, and he was shivering like crazy. He then started vomiting violently, and threw up his weird substance that looked like chicken, but it was coated in something red, and no, it wasn't blood. My mom was positive it wasn't. She immediately took him to the vet because she just lost my 13-year-old dog, so there was no way she was going to lose a 1-year-old puppy only a couple days after we lost Pippin. Thankfully, after a lot of injections and a vet visits, he was back to normal. Now, we didn't give him any treats that would make him sick. We just fed him his normal dog food, and my other dog was completely fine. He also couldn't have gotten something off the floor because we had just finished tidying the house. What we think happened to him was when we put him out to do his business, that fucking psychopath of a woman threw something over a fence, knowing he would eat it. What makes it worse is that she herself is a fucking vet, so she knows exactly what's toxic to dogs. Luckily, We're moving away from this crazy bitch this week, and her husband are now in trouble with the law because they nearly beat a man to death when they were drunk, which now means the police are starting to believe us. So this happened a while back, and I thought I'd share this here, and it's a bit long, so bear with me. Me and my boyfriend at the time were living in this semi-spacious studio apartment that belonged to his dad. We just moved back from England and needed somewhere to stay while we looked for a new place. It was newly renovated, and we had to be out of there pretty quickly because his dad wanted to start renting it out. It was on the 3rd floor, and he recently got a permit to build a roof deck outside. You can walk onto it through the kitchen, and it's kind of level with the neighbor's bedroom window. We were aware that it must have felt a little invasive, so we tried to be considerate about how late we went out on it and regarding the noise and stuff. The tension started to grow between us when we were outside on a Saturday night, having a smoke, and we're just talking at a reasonable volume when we suddenly hear a harrowing, "Will you both shut the fuck up and go the fuck back inside?" I looked back at my boyfriend and just burst out laughing. I looked around to see where it was coming from, and it was old, sweaty hippo of a man peering out his window, gasping for air, as he looked at us as if he was about to kill us. My then boyfriend said, "Mate, you could also just ask normally to keep the noise down," to which he started spewing countless obscenities and barked at us to go back inside. We didn't want his dad to get any complaints about us, so we just went back into the house. Several days later, we got a phone call from his dad saying the neighbor had called him, saying we were blasting loud music all weekend, screaming, and had loads of people over. He said he had to call the police. The thing is, even if he had called the police, we would have been none the wiser because we weren't even there. That Sunday morning, we were going out of town for a few days, so it made no sense. Over the course of a few weeks, every time we'd go out to water the plants on the deck or hang up some washing, he would use an excuse to shout obscenities at us. It was fucking traumatizing. "The pressure in your hose is too high. Your clothes are blocking my sunlight." And, some mornings, we would eat out in the deck and he would complain about the noise of our cutlery clanking on the plates. It was ridiculous. He would constantly tell us how the roof deck shouldn't even be there, so we gave him a copy of the approved permit. Anyway, one afternoon, we were kinda getting busy on the couch. Nothing too R-rated, but enough to maybe think of getting curtains that weren't as see-through as ours were. So, we're doing our thing, and out of nowhere he looks up, and out of the window, and his face just drops. He gets up and walks towards the window. "What the fuck?" I jump out of my skin and ask him what's wrong, but before he would answer me, he leapt outside onto the deck and started banging on our neighbor's window. "What just happened?" I ask him. "He was fucking filming us. I could see a blinking red light through the blinds." I was just like, no frickin' way. I genuinely didn't believe it at the time, and told him it was probably something else. Quite understandably, he wouldn't let it go. He would go out at night and try and look through his window for filming gear. You could only see so far back into his room, so there was no actual certainty that he had any of that stuff. And one day he left his window open, so I guess he wasn't home. And he actually climbed halfway through his window, standing on the garden table, and just freaked. At the end of the room, there was just this wall of videotapes with all these dates and names written on them, and loads of heavy-duty camera equipment at the end of his bed. We called the police and told them we were being stalked. Maybe it was just a coincidence at the time, but I think our suspicions were justified considering his character. He was just an all-out, horrible and creepy guy, and if he had footage of me half naked, I wasn't going to take that chance. The police informed us that we didn't have sufficient enough proof that he was filming us, but that they would question him. Without any real evidence, they weren't able to get a warrant to search his house for the tapes. So, after a while, we decided that the only way to do this was to catch him in the act. It was pretty calm between us for a while. After we involved the police, he stopped bothering us, but I still wanted those tapes. One night, we just got back from dinner, and as we're about to go to bed, we hear a knock at the door. It's our other neighbor, who is super cool. He asked us about this neighbor we were having issues with. The whole street knew we were on bad terms. Everyone usually kept to themselves, but they all hated this guy. We told her the whole story, and after talking to her for a while, She offered to call the police and tell them she also witnessed him filming us. The police came around the next day and informed us that with our neighbor's testimony, they were able to acquire a warrant to search his apartment. A few days later, we watched the entire thing go down. 2 police officers showed up to his apartment, gave him a letter, and we just watched the whole thing. An hour or so later, he was arrested, and that was that. We didn't hear anything back from the cops for a while until we got a call saying that he had been filming us for months. He had footage of us eating, of us napping on the couch, me getting changed, my boyfriend working out. It sent shivers down my spine. Not only was I absolutely furious, but really freaked out. We pressed charges and eventually he got a few months in jail. We eventually moved out, but I never found out what they did with those tapes. I think they're probably in an evidence locker now.